So when someone first told me how the SP404 works, they put it rather simply. They said, this thing doesn't make sound, right? You have to put sound into it. That's how a sampler works. But a few years later, I came to realize that's not exactly true, right? I mean, look at everyone's favorite effect, right? The vinyl sim. That is the SP404 making sound, right? There's a sound coming out of the SP404 and it's not a sample. It's not just the vinyl sim. I mean, one of the MFX even says Noise Gen, right? If you found this video, that means you've probably watched every SP tutorial on the internet, looking to grind until you've learned every secret this thing has inside of it. If you're like me, you've seen every video from SP Vids and every 5 tricks on the SP404 and watched plenty of performances, and you want to learn this thing inside and out. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little challenge to only use the internal sounds on the SP404 to make a whole song, right? No external sampling, no using the microphone or the line in, just using what little MFX there are to create a synthesized tone and then to morph it into a whole collection of different instruments. We'll try to make every single part, right? We'll make keyboards, we'll make pads, we'll make a full drum kit, ambience, everything. So why would we do this? It's a chance to practice and really grind all of the MFX this thing has to offer, even the ones we don't often use, right? If you've never used the Noise Gen before, or you've never used Subsonic, or even the differences between the two different pitches, now's a chance to really push them to the limit and figure out what they're capable of. So you can take some of these skills home with you and use them in whatever beat it is you're trying to make. I want to make it clear that this is an exercise. Maybe you'll come out with some cool lo-fi textures, and maybe you can make a kick drum if you're ever, without a line in. But for the most part, the noise generation in this thing is very, very simple. This is just a way to practice different effects and to really learn. But, I hope you make something you're proud of. It's a cool way to really dive in and learn this thing inside and out. Okay, clear SD card, let's get started. So, the biggest pro tip I have, pretty much overall for using the SP404, is one of those top secret functions, how to access your MFX, and inevitably how to relearn how to access them at all. So, accessing MFX, most people do, hold MFX, pull your knob 1 through 24, right? Or, to access 1 through 12, you hold MFX and hit any of the 12 pads. Now, you might be surprised to learn that you can also access 13 through 24 on the pads if you hold DJ, FX Looper, and MFX together, and access 13, 14, 15, 16, etc. This is kind of one of the biggest game changer things I learned about the SP404, and I hope it helps you in the future. The other pro tip I have is to write yourself a handwritten guide to show you what each of these 12 buttons do. That way, you can quickly access all 24 of your MFX at once, and it also allows you to cover up these precious real estate on your SP404 with stickers, if you so choose. So here's mine, it's roughly the size of the SP404, so you can tuck it beneath your SP404 when you pack it in your case, or beneath your deck saver or whatever. And it's got 12 boxes for each of the pads, and each box has 3 bits of information. The first is the shift function of each of the pads. In case you ever forget where the illumination control is, you now know it's on number 7. The other 2 are the MFX that are assigned to the pad. This offers you a precious opportunity to relearn how to access your MFX, okay? Let's look at pad number 7, okay? You might remember pad 7 is distortion, in case you ever happen to use distortion. However, the secondary MFX, which is actually MFX number 19, is going to be your ring mod. So you might be able to get it in your head that each one of these pads has a primary MFX and a secondary MFX. I've never seen anyone refer to it as such, but this is just one way for you to quickly access the latter 12 MFX here. For example, everyone's favorite vinyl sim is the secondary MFX of number 4. Pad number 4, the primary, is the flanger. Now, who would ever use the flanger instead of the vinyl sim is beyond me, but I digress. You can access the latter 12 on these pads very, very quickly. And because today we're going to be using all these unloved MFX down here, it'll be a really quick way for us to access this. Okay, so you know the rules. No external samples, right? Let's turn off stereo, which will give us a little bit more polyphony down the line. And we're going to start with recording nothing. I'm going to start in F, because our ladder banks are our construction. So, nothing plugged in, no sounds, microphone's off, Just going to record for, just a few seconds. Okay, there you go. Silence. Might be even a little white noise if you listen close, but, practically nothing. All right, how do we turn this into something? We're going to use some of the MFX that have noise generating, okay? So let's start off with white noise. Okay, so our noise generator is going to be on pad number 3, MFX 15. Now, the noise gen is something you may have never used before because it is a little obnoxious, okay? There's 3 types of noise here. We have our white noise. We have our crackle, the digital crackle, not nearly as nice as our vinyl sim. And we have a hum. Right, that's like a guitar plugged into an amp or something, right? So, we're going to start with white noise, because this one we actually use a lot in synthesis. Alright, so I'm going to resample that. I'm going to resample that onto pad 2. Okay? Now, I recorded for quite a long time, maybe like 20 or so seconds, because we're going to be doing some stretched out pads, and we want to be able to have some, some flexibility there. So we have like a nice, long, gated white noise. This one still has nothing. We're going to do the same thing with hum, okay? We have this blank pad here because we need to be able to resample something, even if it's nothing. I'm going to turn my white noise back on. And instead of using white noise, I'm going to use this hum. Obnoxious, I know. Now we have 2 types of noise here. Now, we're going to go and get everyone's favorite Sine generator, which is Subsonic, which is secondary effect number 11 or 23, right? Now, the way Subsonic works is if I play into sound, and I turn on MFX 23, it's going to generate a sine wave, and that sine wave is only going to trigger when it hits a certain threshold. So if I lower the threshold, there. Now, if I change the balance, now it doesn't matter what sound is going in, we have a sine wave. So we need to get this sine wave into a tone that we can use later. So, I'm going to load up a tuner app on my phone. It's going to tell me what note we're playing. Right now it looks to be about D sharp, okay? Let's get this to a C. There we go. That's as close to a C as I think we're going to get. We're going to record a C sine wave to our next pad. Alright, so there's one sine wave. Let me see if I can get a lower one, because we'll be playing with the bass as well. Now, we can't get it exactly to C, which is obviously a little infuriating, but, this is lo-fi, so we'll just do our best. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a really quick crackle, okay? So I'm going to go back to this god-awful noise generator here. And I want to grab one of these little distorted crackles here. Okay, that'll come in handy down the line. So, to review, these are all the generative sounds we have from SP404. We've got our white noise. We've got our hum. We've got our high sine wave. We've got our low sine wave. And we've got that one little crackle there. We're going to try to make a whole song out of just those sounds by putting them through all the MFX and seeing what we can come up with, okay? So the basic principle of this whole video is we want to take the very limited sound production that's coming out of the SP404, such as this sine wave, and we want to turn it into something more complex using what we have, which are the MFX. So I'm going to copy this sound here, this sine wave, Command copy, out to, let's put it into J over here. So what can we do to this sound? Well, there's a whole bunch, right? Some of these MFX are going to change the nature of the sound itself, right? For example, if we were to put it through distortion. Some of these effects are changing the basic nature of what we would consider the oscillator, the thing that is producing the sound. We only really have one type of oscillator in the SP404, which is a sine, right? But if we were to put it through, say a distortion, an overdrive, a fuzz, this is kind of the best chance we have at creating one of the other types of waveforms, which is, say a sawtooth waveform or a triangle wave. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these pads here, and we're going to transform the sound by resampling one effect at a time. So I'm going to take the sine wave, add an MFX 9 to it, which is a fuzz, giving us the closest impression of a different type of sound. I'm going to resample it here. Now I want a very long sample because if this is a pad, I want it to be able to last quite long. So now we have the original, and we have our new wave here. Now, again, that's an obnoxious sound, but quickly, if we were to filter it, we're already getting something with a bit more shape here. I'm going to resample that. Now, just so you know, I'm kind of improvising this one here. So what else can we do this sound, right? We've got a filtered, distorted sine wave. Well, there's all sorts of MFX for you to try. And I would really recommend you hit something that you've never really done before. For example, the ring mod is something we almost never really use, but I think it's worth a shot because it's able to create or it's able to pull out some frequencies we don't usually play with. So that's a secondary effect on number 7 here, which is MFX number 19. It's something weird, but I think the farther we go with this, the more complex it'll be, and eventually it'll sound like something quite unique. Alright, let's flush it out a little bit, add a chorus. Resample that. So all this exercise is a chance for you to really explore what these different MFX do. It's really clear to figure out what a bit crash does to a tone, which is essentially non-changing, as opposed to a sample, which is really complex. Right? So let's do that. Let's drop a bit crash, which is 14. MFX number 14, or secondary on 2 here. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So what we're essentially doing is kind of simplifying our tone here, and then putting a filter over it. See here, there's a little bit of that, you can kind of hear that noise a little bit, but when we bring down the bit, it's kind of filtering out some of that high end. Like I would have never thought about that, right? I like this, it's a bit more chill, there's a little bit less of that other frequency in there, so I'm going to resample that here. Cool. And because this sound in particular is pretty well-rounded, we lost a little bit of that oomph from the sine wave. I'd like to kind of bring that back, so we can really quickly do that with your isolator here. Yeah, I like that. That'll come in handy. So I'm going to resample that. The final thing I want to do is I want to give this a little bit of an attack and a little bit of a decay and release, right? Because right now it's just kind of on-off. It's very simple. It's just a tone, okay? So I'm going to bring up that compressor, which is MFX number 12. And I'm going to play with the attack and sustain a little bit until there's a clear, a hit. Nice. And then I'm going to, just use the level here to give it sort of a release, like this. I'm going to keep it nice and slow because, it's a pad. And I should be free to one-shot this because it's sort of the point. Let's move on. Let's turn this into a keyboard. We could keep messing around with it with different MFX, but I think this is reasonably complex enough, okay? So I'm going to copy this into J4. Now, I'm going to drop on a chromatic pitch shift, okay? And on the chromatic pitch shift, there's two different additional tones here, and then there's your balance, right? So if I zero everything out, let's see, balance, let's see. It's playing your note, your main note, and then it's creating two additional tones. So I can really make a chord really quick right here by bringing one up. There's a basic tritone. To be honest, that initial hit is starting to distract me, so I'm going to cut it out just a little bit. Cool. So instead of making a chord here, I'm just going to make a singular note. Okay, we're starting on C, and now I'm going to sample these both to a D, and I'm going to balance it out so we only hear the new notes. This is what the chromatic pitch shift is for. You don't have to worry about getting the tone quite right. It should generally, it should be in tune. Okay, I'm going to resample this note here. Let's do it again. But this time, I'm going to go up a note, right? Resample here. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to do it again. This time I'm going to go up to G. Let's do a simple pentatonic scale, which is 5 notes. Now, you can tell the chromatic pitch shift, the farther you go away from your root note, the more it's going to distort and change the sound, which is fine. For the sake of this experiment, I think it's different. It'll give us some change, some tracking, which is the sound will change based on what note we play a little bit, right? So I'm going to resample that here. I'm going to go up one more note to an A. There we go. Resample that here. And finally, I'm going to go up the octave. Resample that down here. I think we can afford to keep going. Let's fill out this pad. I'm going to apply the effect to here and fill these out. And one more. And last one. So now, 4 through 12, we have a scale, a pentatonic scale. Pretty cool. Let's go back down. So I'm going to go back down to an A down here. Okay, resample that here. Resample that to here. And lastly, I'm going to go down to an F. Even though this is a pentatonic scale, we're going to have one different note down here, just so we know it's different and we can use this to make some more interesting chord changes. And now we have a scale. That sounds really great. I like that a lot. And that came from just a sine wave and all the MFX that were able to pull out some of those frequencies and do interesting things to the sound. So from nothing, we've created a very rudimentary, what's called a rompler, a synthesizer that's been recorded. So if you wanted to bake these together in the traditional SP404 way, you could throw this through, like a vinyl sim, right? Not bad for a lo-fi synth. Let's move on. Let's make another one. So we're going to make another synthesizer here, right? I'm going to again start with the C sine wave. Now I've copied the last synthesizer that we made here, just to make sure that we don't make something that sounds too similar. We want these synthesizers to have distinct, different tones, okay? So, starting with the sine wave, what can we do to it? What can we do that we didn't do before? So we should pick an MFX here that really generates or brings out more frequencies. And the go-to for that is a ring mod, which is secondary effect on 7 or MFX number 19. Oh, jeez. Okay, so what I came up with after messing around with the ring mod a little bit is this. It's basically a very precise set of frequencies here that somehow stay in tune with a C, and I've turned the balance all the way up. So all I hear are these newly generated frequencies here. And my favorite part of this sound is this little spin up you might hear in the first like couple milliseconds there. Woo, like that's fun. So I'm gonna resample this here. Yeah, I like that. Still very distinctly different, which is good. Okay, what else can we do to this sound? Let's try a phaser or a flanger. Let's try a flanger. So, you know, it's up to you where you want to go with these synthesizers. If you want to be a little more ambitious, you can definitely give them some change over time. I just want kind of a subtle little something to give it just a little bit of movement. So I'm going to stick with that. Okay, so where can we possibly go from a flanger? I've found that using the reverb sometimes as a textural tool works great. Not just as a plain reverb, but if we max out the balance on the reverb, what we're only hearing is the wet, which is that digital reverb here. But it does a lot to kind of soften out that nasally sound. We still have that kind of spin up, but now it's very subdued. And it naturally creates a release. And if you hold down if you hold a note just long enough, the reverb gets loud enough to kind of cover the tail of it turning off. Listen to that. You don't really hear when I turn the button off, which is, that's great. If I do it really quick, it does create some cool textures there, and, you know, with a bit more time, we might be able to work these into the song. But for now, I'm just going to resample this as a single note. Alright, we one-shot that. We've got our note. I think it's enough. Okay, so I'm going to go through the process and build a keyboard again here. But to be honest, that spin-up makes it a little bit hard to play. I'm curious, if we were to get rid of the spin-up on this keyboard, that initial note, and give us just like a marked, clear attack. Let's see how it sounds. Okay, so see, that sounds pretty cool. That sounds a bit more like a bell. Now that we got rid of that wah, now we just kind of have a clear, you know, the attack is just 0. It's like 100% note on. There we go. We have 2 clean synthesizer sounds. And, you know, if I were to throw a vinyl sim over this, like we should damn near everything. we have the workings of a song, so this is sounding great. Okay, so we've got two pretty cool synthesizers going here. Let's make a lead. I'm again going to start from a sine wave. Here. I'm going to copy that over to H. Okay, we're going to start here. And I really like how well using distortion, overdrive, fuzz works to turn this into a different kind of wave. So if I were to try number 7, which is distortion, that's giving us almost like a square wave kind of feel. I might be wrong. Now, I'm not enough of a synth geek to like the sound of just a pure wave, so I have a lot of faith that this sound is going to change over time. And 2 synthesizers later, I hope you bear with me and just deal with some obnoxious sounds. Let's stick with this wave for now, and let's see how far we can take it. Now, it's not exactly a square wave, but the thing is, this sound is a little bit narrower and a little bit simpler, which is kind of what we need to contrast and juxtapose these other sounds here, right? So what else can we do? How about, let's widen it just a little bit with a chorus. Okay, let's resample that. Alright, and just to make it a little less nasally. Whoa, that's kind of... Ooh. Okay, not what I had in mind, but I'm just going to push this to see how far this goes. Let's try. What can we do with this sound? I do like this a lot. I want to put this through an EQ, which is MFX number 13, or secondary number 1 here. And now I'm going to add the compression. I'm going to give it a tail. Okay, so while messing around a little bit, I found something very interesting inside of the normal pitch change, which is MFX number 21, or secondary on the 9 here. Now, I never really mess with that frequency knob up here, but when you bring it all the way up, it's got a very cool kind of like shimmer effect going on, so I'm definitely going to record that. Okay, so I'm going to copy this into C. And let's try to turn this into a keyboard, as we normally do. When you're just doing random little effects like this, you never know what's going to happen, and it turns out this kind of cool sounding thing we made doesn't work on every pitch, because there's so many different pitches going on in this one note. It turns out when you just warp it to your heart's desire, it doesn't always sound good. So we're kind of limited here. That one sounds pretty cool. So let's just roll with that. Let's make a very limited keyboard, and that'll kind of help us come up with a melody too. Alright, we have something there. Now, because this one is so long, it's just a little too chaotic to have them going at once. So this one I've opted to gate. The choke group would be super helpful here, but I think this is fine. Not bad. Kind of weird. You know, this is not by any definition a lead, but I think it should kind of help tell the the kind of sonic story that we're going for here. So this works. So that last lead went like really far. I want to just show you how to make a really simple one. Okay, so I'm going to take that classic sine wave, make one more instrument here. Let's bring it into G, and let's start by bringing it up the octave. There we go. Let's use the vinyl sim to give it just a little bit of life here. Sounds good. We want to keep it simple, but, you don't want to just be playing a sine wave as your lead. Or maybe you do, I don't know, I don't care. And let's try octave. See if we can give it just a little more oomph. Octave is number 11. Down here. Just a little bit. Okay, and lastly, just to make sure we have some distinction between the different notes, I'm going to add that compressor. And I'm going to do this little level trick just to make sure it doesn't go on too long. So I can kind of one-shot these if I so choose. And let's see how this plays as a keyboard. I'm going to trash these. I'm going to do the keyboard right inside of here, which is G. Once again, not a fan of that initial attack, so I'm going to go through and mark them all. And this time I opted to do a full scale. Now the problem with doing a full scale is that your range is a little bit limited. And with the lead, you would want this to go quite a bit longer. You could use multiple banks to build, I mean, hell, a whole keyboard if you wanted. You could use the whole thing and make a keyboard with 120 notes if you really wanted to, but, you know. We'll use this to crank out like a little melody somewhere in the song. Alright, let's do our bass. Let's do our bass sound. So I'm going to start off with this low sub that we recorded. Now, I'm going to work inside of bank B. Alright, I'm going to add a little compressor here. Now, if you're not really comfortable using a compressor, which I haven't been for the longest time, the bass is a great place to start with really hearing what a compressor does. Every bass player has a compressor on their pedal board, because it really makes a clear difference when you're playing a bass without without much attack. The compressor can just do all of the attack for you. We're going to use that compressor, and then we're just going to use this as our bass sound. Maybe even with a little fade out. So I'm going to resample that bass sound into 4. Okay, I cut off the front, like the front couple milliseconds of that compressed hit, but it's enough for me. I like that. It's not too sharp, and we're going to have a lot of, compressed stuff down the line, so let's use this as our bass, okay? We're going to go to chromatic pitch shift. So let's start with our C. Let's go down, let's go up, okay? Let's go up to a D. Similarly, if you had enough effort, it would be better to build the keyboard first before you compress it and then compress it afterwards. That way it's a little more consistent. But, we only have so much time in the day. Okay, so we are so far derived from that original sine wave. We went from this up to... You can hear how disruptive this process is. But to be honest, that's kind of a cool tone. If you wanted this to be clearer, then you could... Actually, you could record a sine wave on each of the pads, right? Bring up Subsonic 23 here. You could use Subsonic to create a specific sine wave for every note, if you wanted to. But for the sake of this experiment, I'm kind of liking how weird and warbly this is. With enough time, you could flush out a whole scale. You could get a cleaner sound. You could have, affected it before. Of course, you could, distort it if you wanted to. You wanted something a little crunchier. Or add some fuzz. You have all of these effects to flavor this however you want. But honestly, just making this keyboard has given us enough of a warbly interesting sound here. I'm going to keep that as it is, because I think the other tones we're going to make are going to be complex enough that let's keep a simple bass for now. I also think this is just a technique you can use during normal song making too. If you need a bass line to your song, you can just, subsonic a clean plate. Take any sound, make a subsonic, and just, crank out a little bass line. One of the trademark facets of lo-fi music is the simple bass line. Simple but catchy. So, just need a couple notes and there's your keyboard. Let's start with the kick. I'm going to start with this white noise here, okay? So we've got our white noise, okay? What do we do to it to turn this sound into a kick? Well, the white noise is a very versatile sound that's used in normal synthesizers a lot. Actually, a lot of synthesizers even have a little noise knob on them that fades in this white noise sound. Let's start with an octave effect. We've got the balance all the way down, so we've just got this low kind of rumble, okay? I'm gonna resample that. Now I don't need to resample that very long. Bring up our compressor, which is number 12. Now, that compressor immediately gives us that punch that we need inside of a kick drum, right? I'm gonna make that sustain nice and high. Make the attack nice and, ooh, punchy. If we want to fade out real quick, we can use just the level. So there's a basic kick drum. We can use our oscillator to EQ it just a little bit. You know, could be better. You could make it a little more punchy, you could make it a little more laid back, you could make it more sub, however you want. There's one kick. Okay, let's make some kind of little percussion-y thing, okay? I'm gonna find that crackle that I recorded earlier. This little guy here. So how much can we really do with a little crackle like that? Let's add a little chorus to give it a little more like width. So it might be a little inaudible, but you know, now it's just a little bit wider. Let's add a little reverb. Give it some space. Alright, I want that time to be nice and long. Toned down. And let's make the balance pretty high on the reverb. Let's resample that. So now we're going to play with the filter a little bit, but we're going to really focus on the resonance, which I almost never really use resonance in my music, but I like to really use the resonance to create some frequencies here that didn't exist before. So this resonance is going to be doing a lot of work for us down the line. I want to use the cutoff to tune this instrument. Now you can tell that there's already a clear note there. I'm going to put this through my tuner again. Alright, that's about as close as I can get it. I'm going to take a quick pause to show you two mistakes I've made so far in hopes that, you know, maybe you don't do it if you try the same experiment. For one, you have to keep turning off the stereo, okay? I think stereo is default, and if you really want to keep this all in mono, you're going to have to keep your eye on this stereo and make sure that it doesn't go back to stereo every time you sample something new or resample something, okay? If you want to be able to play a bunch of notes at one time, keeping stereo off will allow you to play more than one, I think it's 4 notes at a time, or 6. So keep stereo off and keep your eye on stereo. And number two, you might notice some of these samples cut off just a little bit earlier because I'm rushing just a little bit and I'm not letting everything resample all the way through. Now I would love for that to be a clean sample and really fade out. It was here. It was recording this reverb tail that I didn't finish all the way. So make sure you take the time and really let your tails finish out. Let's make some hi-hats. I'm going to start again with this white noise, which is still on G1. And I'm going to do that compressor trick again. Using the third fader, I'm going to make this a very short note. I want just a little natural tail there. So I'm going to resample into 9 here. So now we've got a little percussive white noise there. It's a little aggressive for my taste. Let's bring up the oscillator here. So I'm just turning down a low in the mid, and we have a nice little super high here. You could, you know, flush yours out based on the nature of your song, or, you know, you can always come back to this later. But for now, I'm just gonna cut this out. Have like a nice little high here. And lastly, I'm just gonna throw a filter on this real quick. This is up to you. If your sound is obviously a bit more muted and dusty and lo-fi, you know, this really high hit may not fit. To me, that doesn't fit, so I'm gonna throw a little filter on there. Cool, right? So I'm gonna resample that. Building your kit in one pad is very nice because you can listen to what you've already made. and you can kind of hear if it fits, and to me, that fits pretty well. While I'm here, I'd like to make one more hi-hat so I can have two to bounce between. So you can go back and you can play with the oscillator sample a little bit, or you can play with the filter. Just change the little settings a little bit, and you're going to have two hi-hats you can work with. There we go. I'm going to resample that. So there we go. Already we have our kick, some hi-hats, and a little percussive sound. Let's keep organized here. I'm going to take these 4 finished products and I'm going to load them onto kit A, okay? So I'm going to be doing some copying here. Copy the kick into pad A. Number 9. I like my kicks in the bottom corner, okay? G. I'm going to copy this percussive sound into bank A, and I don't know, let's put it in 6. Back to G. Let's take our 2 hi-hats and keep them in the same place, okay? So I'm going to copy 11, bring it to A, 11, record. I'm going to take that other one, copy. I'm going to bring it to A, 12. All right, we're already organized here. I was noticing that these hi-hats sound a little bit like a clap, especially when played together. So let's make a clap out of these sounds that we've already made. You know, we can work linearly here. We don't have to always start back at the noise. Sounds like a clap, right? Let's give it a listen. 1, 2, 3. I kind of like 2. So we can give this a bit more depth in a few more ways, you know. Actually, even a chorus might not sound too bad. A chorus being MFX number 3. Yeah, sounds pretty good. Let's do it. Record. And similarly to the hi-hats, you can make different ones if you wanted to, but for now, I'll just stick with 1. Maybe we can do something else to fix it up, okay? Let's try the other pitch shift. You also never know what you're going to find, you know? That might inspire you. That might be like the lead into a song. You know, we could record that later and add that in. Yeah, you know what? Let's keep that. We'll try to use that as a transition later. I'm going to drop that in 4. With the chorus. I'm going to stay here. So this is our keeper. And 4, we're going to keep these 2. Let's bring these over to our main kit. Okay? Copy. Boom. To group A. This is a clap. Let's put it 7. And this special effect thing here. Nope, my bad. We're in H. I'm going to copy that up to number 4 up here, up in the corner. Keep it out of our way when we're finger drumming here. Okay, let's see if we can put this hum to some work. What can we do with this very pure electrical sound? We're gonna find out, okay? I'm gonna copy this into our workspace here. Let's open up our pitch shift, which is secondary effects number 9, which is effects number 1. Cool. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Using slider number 1, we can create sort of like a pitch fall. So I'm going to be recording that, because that sounds great. Now, if you put in a bit more time, you could tune that so it's in key with C, but I think for now it'll be okay. You'll notice at the end of this sound, there's that little rumble there. I'm going to keep that, because that's the kind of thing we can turn into something else. I copy that sound to 8, and I want to just grab that rattle. Get that little rumble there. A ring mod is a pretty obnoxious sounding thing. You know, with a little bit of reverb, that could be like a great bird sound. But we're not going for bird sound, we're going for a little chirp here. And there you go, look at that. It's the Boost Mobile
Where you at, dog?
Little chirp there. Resample that. Keep that. Hilarious. Alright, I'm going to take these finished products here and bring them back to Group A. Now what we're missing here is a snare. Let's make a snare real quick. I bet we can do this real fast. I'm going to copy this white noise into I1. And similarly, I want to bring up that compressor again. You'll notice this is very, very similar to making a hi-hat, but we're going to let it like ride a little bit longer, okay? Here we go. Let's get rid of some of that high. Let's make this a little more lo-fi here. See, if you're creative, you could really make some funky sounding snares. That's good enough for me. Let's resample that. Let's go through some of the effects. A little flanger, maybe. Now, that doesn't sound great, but I'm going to, use some reverb or something after this. So I'm just going to make the sound, use this flanger to make the sound a little more complex here. Resample that here. Now it's a little dirty. Let's widen it a little bit. A little chorus. There we go. Resample that here. And what else can we do? Let's try just a little touch of reverb. Yeah, give it just a little more space there. And it's almost like, there's a little resonance there. Cool. Let's keep that. Okay. And lastly, to keep it in line with the rest of the kit, I'm going to filter this one too. Yeah, I kind of like the sound of this through like a filter, Let's put it through here. Right, so, this may not be the best sounding snare in the world, but, somewhere along the line you can find a snare that works for you. I'm just going to stick with this one just to show you what it's like when you go through, enough effects. So now, if we look at everything, we've got our kick down here. We've got this snare we just made. We've got our two hi-hats. Very similar. We've got our clap, which is just the two hi-hats played together. Not bad. We've got that, like that initial percussion we made. We've got the sub fall. Nothing here. We've got that weird transition there. And then we've got the little chirp. All right, so all together, it's not bad. You could really go through and refine this. I'm going through pretty quick. I haven't found the perfect formula yet, but I know that if I were to put in enough time and do enough trial and error, you can make something that sounds pretty dope. I like the kick a lot. The hi-hats are super handy. Snare could use some work, maybe a little higher. Actually, we could even repitch this, right? Go into secondary effect on number 9, which is MFX number 21. Depending on the kind of music you're making, you could really get into some experimental stuff here. Or we can glue it together with, with vinyl sim here. Basics of a kit. I almost guarantee you could do a better job than I did at this, but the point is, we're pulling together different sounds. So all of that came out of white noise and hum and the crackle. And speaking of that, we haven't used the crackle yet. If I go back in here, where was that? Let's just keep that in the kit as well, like a nice little, little micro house percussion here. Take this, bring that up to, 8. Let's truncate that, delete, mark, delete. This whole video was inspired by someone explaining to me how moldable white noise was. And anyone knows white noise sounds very, very similar to natural rain, just based on how much of the sound spectrum that it takes up. So, I want to use this white noise to make a rainstorm, and I want to use that to introduce this song. So, I'm going to take this rain sound, and I'm going to turn it into a rainstorm. And I'm going to bring this through distortion just a little bit, which should allow us to shape our rain in a pretty simple way. You could build any kind of rainstorm you want here. I like this one, it's a little bassier, right? So I'm going to resample this here. And I'm going to play with the effect just a little bit. What would a rainstorm be without some lightning? I'm going to use the octave here, which is number 11. And we've got some nice low rumbly stuff. Okay, we've got kind of a root there. I'm going to even use this to fade the lightning in. Okay, let's put this in 5 down here. Ready? I wonder if the filter would make that any kind of more lightning-y. Ooh, cool. Ooh, we can use resonance for wind. This will be fun. Okay, putting it through this voice effect for some reason gives it a little bit more of a rumble. So I'm going to use this as our lightning. I'm going to resample this here. And now I'm going to use an isolator, simple 3-band EQ here, to really control this rainstorm over time. So we've got our slightly animated rainstorm here. We've got our lightning hit. I'm going to use this isolator to really control this rainstorm over time. We've got our lows, our mids, our highs. This should really give us the control we want over a rainstorm. And I'm just going to occasionally throw in this little lightning strike here. I'm going to one-shot it. Cool. I'm going to start around there. I'm going to make sure the isolator only affects the rain. And here we go. Let's build a little rainstorm. Now, it does sound a little bit like wind. So let's see if we can do something to get some droplets. We do have this little click. Let's see if we can make this sound like a water drop. So interestingly, taking this click and putting it through a chromatic pitch shift here, or a regular pitch shift, it softens the sound a lot, and it sounds just enough like a little water droplet, right? Maybe. But if we do a bunch of them, a different kind of layers there, then, maybe it'll work. What I've got is kind of like some droplets. They're all the same pitch, and they're all kind of the same sound, other than the slightly quieter ones. I wonder what would happen if I put this through the wah. The wah is MFX number 10. Oh, there it is. That's kind of fun. Okay, so we're not underwater, unfortunately. That's pretty... Okay, that's kind of cool. It's a little underwater sound, but not bad. Let's resample this one. I don't know. Let's try a tape echo. You know, I know this sounds crazy, but all right. So now we have this kind of drops, and they're very random, but combined with Rainstorm, we have the makings of a lightning storm there. So that should be good enough for now. All right, and there you have it. We have like a bunch of different instruments here. I'm going to throw them together in a song, and we're going to see how it all works out. So you've reached the end. Thank you so much for giving it a listen. And if you follow through on this challenge, please send me your videos. I'd love to see how they all come together. Thank you for having me in the SP404 community, and I'll see you at the next one.